Print, email, Facebook, Twitter. More. Victory over Islamic State sways Iraqi voters as al-Abadi seeks to fend off Iran-backed rivals. Polls have closed across Iraq in the first national election since the country declared victory over the Islamic State group. The vote, the fourth since the 2003 US-led toppling of Saddam Hussein, was marked by reports of low turnout and irregularities. Results are expected within the next 48 hours according to the independent body that oversees Iraq's elections, but negotiations to choose a prime minister tasked with forming a government are expected to drag on for months. Voting began early Saturday morning in a contest that had no clear front-runner after weeks of official campaigning. Iraqi Prime Minister Haider al-Abadi's stiffest competition came from political parties with closer ties to Iran. Baghdad streets began to fill up with cars before voting concluded Saturday evening after Mr. Abadi partially lifted a security curfew in an effort to improve turnout. Nearly all civilian vehicles had been banned from Baghdad street Saturday morning, and many voters complained of having to walk more than 4 kilometers to reach polling stations. Iraq's most senior Shiite cleric spoke out on the issue of voter participation Saturday afternoon, encouraging Iraqis to vote to prevent the arrival of a corrupt parliament. The lack of participation will give the opportunity for others to reach parliament, and they will be very far from the aspirations of the people, said Sheikh Abdul Mahdi al-Kabuli, the representative of Grand Ayatollah Ali al-Sistani, on local Iraqi television from Karbala. Mr. Sistani has repeatedly encouraged Iraqis to vote into power Saturday, a new political class to combat corruption. Though turnout at polling stations in Mosul, turnout appeared to be higher, with more than 40% of eligible voters casting their ballots at polling stations across the city, according to the Deputy Commander of Nineveh Operation Command, Brigadier General Jasem Mohammed Khalil. Other areas reported around 30% turnout. Participation in 2014 vote was about 60%. For those who did attempt to vote, some in Baghdad complained of voting irregularities at polling stations linked to a new electronic voting system implemented for the first time this year in an effort to reduce fraud. Nouri al-Maliki, Mr. Abadi's predecessor and arguably his most powerful opponent, said he was aware of violations at some polling stations in Iraq, adding that the process lacked proper oversight. "We are not reassured," Mr. Maliki said in a phone interview. Thamar, 45, along with his wife and daughter, was turned away from a polling station north of central Baghdad. Mr. Aref had turned in his old voter ID card months ago for the biometric identification card required by the new system. However, Mr. Aref's biometric card wasn't ready ahead of Saturday, and, with neither card, the polling station did not allow him to cast a ballot. "I lost my right to vote," he said. Journalists documented several similar cases at a number of different polling stations across Baghdad Saturday morning. Amir Mohammed, the supervisor of a polling station in Azamiya, Baghdad, said some people couldn't vote because they did not pick up their new biometric ID cards in time. "The problem is not with us," she said. A member of Iraq's Electoral Commission also deflected blame for Saturday's reported irregularities. "There were some problems with the electronic equipment due to misuse by some employees," Hazem al-Ridini said. Victory over his sways votes in central Baghdad. Voters supporting Mr. Abadi said they were doing so because they gave him credit for Iraq's military victory over IS. Mr. Abadi took revenge for civilians killed in insurgent attacks in Iraq with the victory over Daesh, said 71-year-old Filiha Hassan, using the Arabic term for IS after IS overran nearly a third of Iraq in the summer of 2014. The group launched waves of suicide bombings targeting civilians in Baghdad and other pockets of government-controlled territory. With support from the US-led coalition and Iran, Mr. Abadi oversaw a grueling war against the extremists and declared victory over the group in December. Despite Mr. Abadi's military achievements, Iraq continues to struggle with an economic downturn sparked in part by a drop in global oil prices, entrenched corruption and years of political gridlock. In addition to Mr. Maliki, Mr. Abadi's most powerful competition is from an alliance of candidates with close ties to the country's powerful, mostly Shiite paramilitary forces, and an alliance led by influential Shiite cleric Muqtada al-Sadr. Jassim Mohsen, 58, who fought against IS with the paramilitary forces, said he's casting his vote for the alliance with paramilitary ties because of their personal sacrifices. "I elected the Fatah list because they are the only ones who fought Daesh and gave blood," he said. Some Sunnis voting Saturday said they were hopeful this election would help Iraq move beyond sectarian politics and become more inclusive. Marginalization of Iraq's Sunnis under Mr. Maliki is seen as a factor that allowed his to rise in power in Iraq. Mr. al-Abadi has led a more cross-sectarian government marked by his ability to balance the interests of his two allies often at odds, the US and Iran. 3 killed in Kirkuk car bomb. The Islamic State claimed responsibility for a car bombing that killed an election observer and 2 voters in the city of Kirkuk in an attack, security sources linked to the election. The militants had threatened violence in the run-up to the vote. In total there are 329 parliament seats at stake, with nearly 7,000 candidates from dozens of political alliances. Iraq's constitution allows lawmakers more than 3 months after the ratification of the election results to form a government, but many expect the process to drag on for much longer if there is no clear winner, as dozens of political parties attempt to cobble together a political bloc large enough to hold a majority of seats in parliament. AP/Reuters print, email, Facebook, Twitter.